Hello guys, and welcome to this Vue Meetup Online. My name is Simone Cuomo, and I'm a software engineer at Digital Labs. Our sponsor today is Digital Labs, your partner in modern digital transformation. We specialize in mentorship, consulting, training, and staff augmentation for enterprise organizations. Find out more at digitallabs.com or send us an email at hi@digitallab. Before we start today, there are a couple of announcements to share. Digital Labs is very busy in providing free event. And as you can see from these slides, we have a couple of events coming up. There are two GraphQL events. There is a Vue Online coming up next month on the third Thursday of every month, and also Angular and React event. You can find them all on our website or on our actual labs website on the desktop website. Next up, we have the JavaScript Marathon training. So as you may be aware, during the month of April, we've been providing training every Tuesday and every Wednesday, apologies. And these are the next Vue event coming up. Next week, we're going to discuss the unit testing. Then the week after, we're going to share how to use a Vue application in AWS, so how to install it and how to actually set everything up. And lastly, we're going to do a full session on debugging on Vue. Don't forget that we already had three different sessions on Vue.js, a starting up session, one about Vue X, and lastly, we also had one about PWA last week. So go and check our YouTube channel for more information about it. It is now time to introduce the speaker. If you've ever done Vue or are interested in Vue, probably already know both of them. We got Evan and Thorsten today with us. And
hi.
Hello.
That's good. And the schedule is quite simple. The welcome that we just did, a few minutes to introduce everyone. And then Evan is going to start off with his presentation, and then Thorsten is going to finish off the second part of the presentation. We're going to keep questions at the very end. So if you do add questions, in the chat, at the very end of the session, the speaker are going to choose which question to reply, and we're going to go through them. So don't hesitate to just write everything. I will also be looking at the chat, so if you got anything that you want to share, please add them to the list. And with that, I think it's time to pass the control over to Evan.
All right.
Evan, if you want to share your screen?
Let me try that. Can people hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I'm also running some heavy script right now. So if my video is kind of choppy, all right, let's see. Like my computer's fan is running really hard right now. Okay, cool. So thanks to everyone for coming. And so today, this is going to be a state of Vue update on obviously a lot of things about Vue 3. So let's get right into it. So what's the status of Vue 3 core? We are beta ready. In fact, we plan to release beta today. So beta 1 will be out today. And what this means is entering beta means all our planned RFCs are merged and implemented. So at this stage, we will not be submitting RFCs on major new additions or breaking changes. So you can assume that the API is relatively stable at this point. Obviously, there could still be minor adjustments until we reach RC, which is when we actually freeze the API. But it is a good time to start using the beta to test out your library integration, test if you're a library author, or you can use it to build small experimental applications. Don't use it in critical apps yet. Don't use it. Don't try to upgrade your production app to this version yet. Right? It's still beta for a reason. But if you have something new, you have something that's not extremely critical, you can start trying it out. And so this will be a period where we focus on stability and library integrations, mostly fixing bugs and making sure some of the libraries will, especially the core libraries, can support Vue 3 and work smoothly with it. Now, so what is in Vue 3 if you still haven't tried it so far? First of all, performance, obviously, then there is tree shaking support. So the framework is now designed with tree shaking in mind, so that we can drop the parts that you don't really need. This solves kind of the dilemma where we were adding more and more stuff to Vue 2, so the bundle size keeps growing, but there's no way for us to sort of shave off the weight. So tree shaking helps us with that. Composition API, obviously, you probably have heard about this for long enough. And then there is Fragment, Teleport, and Suspense. So we'll talk about this in a bit more details. And obviously, there's better TypeScript support and the custom renderer API. So let's go into them, go through them one by one. First is performance. I've talked about how we reworked the internals of the rendering mechanism in Vue 3 in a few talks. If you're interested, you can look up my talks from either Vue Amsterdam or VueConf US, but where I both touched upon this for a bit. So I'm not going to dig too deep into that here. But the general idea is we rewrote the virtual DOM implementation from the ground up. So that itself brings some improvements, but the biggest improvement comes from the compiler-informed fast paths. So the Vue 3 compiler, while compiling your templates, generates code that is that we apply a lot of compile time optimizations, so that the generated, although it's a virtual DOM render function, it's a highly optimized one. It hoists any static parts that it can hoist. It leaves hints that the runtime can use to take the fast paths to skip unnecessary work as much as possible. And we also, the internal component initialized instantiation is much more efficient than Vue 2. So overall, you should see 1.3 to 2x better update performance. That is to say, typically, if you spend like 100 millisecond updating something in Vue 3, you'll probably see, 70 to 50 milliseconds. So, and also server-side rendering is also a lot faster. So the new server-side rendering compiler compiles the templates in a much more optimized format than Vue 2 as well. So we should also see a 2.3x faster SSR performance. So one thing to note is these are based on benchmarks that we try to simulate typical scenarios with benchmarks, but obviously they cannot be fully representative of the performance in the actual application because there are a lot more variants involved. Okay, so this is a data grid that was from quite a while ago, but the column that is highlighted with the red border in green is the column that's most representative of what you should, what's most relevant to most users, because this is what you get when you pre-compile templates with the CLI and using a typical Vue component. Okay, so that's performance. Then there's tree shaking. So in Vue 3, we got rid of the idea that everything is being exposed on the single Vue object kind of API. So if you're using the standalone browser build, you can still do that. But if you're using a bundler and using the ES module build of Vue, then you can only import named imports from the Vue package. So that means most of the things, APIs that you import are tree shakeable. So optional features like transition or, well, in fact, say when you use template features like vModel and transition, the compiler generates code that imports these features on demand. So if a template uses vModel, it will import the code for vModel. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. So your final application, if none of your templates use vModel, then vModel will not even be included in the bundle. So that means a lot of these optional features can be dropped. So a bare bone hello world size of the current Vue 3 is 13.5 kilobytes. There is also it's also possible to use a compile time flag so that you can drop options that can support. If you only stick to composition API, then it can go further down to 11.75 KB. Now, with all the optional features included, the runtime is at 22.5 KB gzipped. So that's still lighter than current Vue 2. and we managed to pack a lot more new features in it, including the whole composition API, fragments, teleport, and all that. So let's talk about the composition API. So composition API can be used alongside the existing options API. It's purely additive, so it doesn't take away your ability to use the old API, but it provides a good advanced mechanism for flexible logic composition and reuse, which is much better, more maintainable, and more flexible than mixins or other component-based patterns. So with composition API, this should be the go-to if you're trying to extract reusable logic in your new Vue applications. Now, the reactivity module of the composition API can be used as a standalone library. So this could be a pretty niche use case, but just to note that it is possible. All right, now fragments. So this is pretty much self-explanatory, and it just works. You're no longer limited to a single root node in your templates. Your template can have multiple root nodes or even just text. Manual render functions can simply return arrays if it wants to return a fragment, or just return a string if you want to render some text. So all of this thanks to fragments internally. Now, there is another thing called teleport, previously known as portal. Unfortunately, we decided to rename it because the standards body, the Chrome team, is working on a native element called portal. So if we choose the portal name, unfortunately, it's going to lead to some confusing conflict. So we decided to rename the element, and more details to be shared by Linus-Sport. Thorsten, he's gonna talk about some of the detailed features and example of the teleport element. So this is a new built-in feature, which is also tree shapeable. And then there's Suspense. So Suspense is also a new built-in element that you can use to wait on nested async dependencies in the child component tree. So it doesn't matter how deep the async dependency is nested, you can wait on it inside Suspense, and it'll work with, and what defines an async dependency is an async setup function. Setup function is the function you use to, it's a new hook that primarily used for composition API, but it also can be async, which makes the component itself an async dependent component. So the component won't render until the async setup resolves, during which you can fetch data or do other things. And in fact, the built-in async component support in Vue 3 is built on top of this mechanism. So you can use Suspense to sort of wait on arbitrary number of nested async setup components, and then show a loading state at a higher level and flip over when all of them are resolved. So this gives you a better way to orchestrate async network requests. Better TypeScript support. So the code base is written in TypeScript now with auto-generate type definitions. So it's guaranteed to always be in sync with the actual types. And then the API will be the same in JavaScript and TypeScript. So your code will even look largely identical because in most cases, specific type hints is pretty rarely needed because we provide inference as much as possible. And then, especially if you're using composition API, then it will have very excellent TypeScript support built in. We even support TSX if that is your thing. So if you're a diehard class fan, class component is still supported. Vue class component, there is a next branch. It's currently in alpha. I think it's 8.0 alpha, which already works with the current Vue 3. And then we're also doing some explorative type checking in single file component templates, which is a thing people have been kind of wanted for a very long time. And this is still experimental. Hopefully we can get it into beta at a later stage. Cool. And then there's the custom render API, which previously in Vue 2, we allow people to do this, but it's possible to do this, but in Vue 2, you have to fork Vue and understand a lot of internals, and then sort of ship your own version of a renderer. But with Vue 3, Customer Renderer is going to be a first-class API, which makes it much easier to use, much easier for the custom render authors to maintain their renderers by just pulling in Vue itself as a dependency. Now, native script Vue integration is already underway by Igor. So, which means you'll be able to use native script with Vue 3 pretty soon. And then there are also people working on experimental WebGL renderer, custom renderer. So you can use the Vue syntax to author a WebGL object graph, and then you can render these objects using a WebGL renderer. So that is being worked on, and it can even be used directly inside a normal Vue application, which is really cool. Okay, so what's left for Vue 3 to be finally shipped? So Vue core is pretty much done in itself, but the work left is mostly about docs, migration tools, guides, router, Vue X, CLI dev tools, and obviously the IE 11 compatibility build. Okay, so docs and migration guides is currently under heavy work by the docs team, thanks to Natalia, Sarah Drasner, Ben, and Fanan. So this is going to take a bit of time because we have to sort of look through all the RFCs and update the sections accordingly, but there's already a lot of works done, and we're probably going to open source the repo really soon. Router is being worked on by Eduardo, aka Pasva. Router Next is currently already in alpha, so if you look for Vue Router at Next on NPM, you should get a version that works with Vue 3. Similarly, Vue X Next is also in alpha, available on NPM already, thanks to Kia King. And we're also So the Vue X Next and Vue Router Next will not have significant API changes. So they should be largely the same, because we're trying to retain backwards compatibility as much as possible. But we are indeed experimenting on some ideas about the next iteration of Vue X, which should make the usage a bit less verbose and a bit more, also kind of leverage the new composition API to provide a Vue X syntax that aligns better with the composition API, right? So that's something we're currently also working on. Now the CLI, so if you look for the plugin, CLI plugin Vue Next, so this plugin has support for building a Vue Next application, and and now this I think this also includes the code mods. So the code mods are not complete yet, but we will be using the CLI to offer code mods that can automatically transform some of the existing usage in your application to the new version. So that will be based on per IFC basis. Test Utils is being worked on by the test team, Lachlan, Mir, Jess, and Afonku. Sorry, I can't pronounce the IDs. But Test Utils Next is not completely ready yet, but it's pretty close. And the README shows a very clear picture of what's going to be supported or not. But the general idea is Vue Test Utils 1 will be supporting Vue 2, and Test Utils Next will be supporting Vue 3. And there's a lot more work in this area done by the team. So shout out to them. And then DevTools. We already got an early prototype working for using the current DevTools code base for Vue 2. So it can show the component tree, but that was kind of a proof of concept. So the full integration will be worked on as we release beta, which is pretty much now. So we'll start working on this really soon. And then there's IDE support. So earlier we showed some explorative work by Rahul, ZNCK. He did the type checking experiments, and OCT Ref with Pine, who is the author of Vader, He's going to, so I actually just talked to him today, and he says he's going to have a lot of free time in May, so he will be trying to get beta ready for Vue 3 starting in May. So that will be IDE support. And Nuxt team is also already working on Vue 3 integration, and they also have a working prototype. So if you use Nuxt, so just wait for it, it's coming. So what about 2.x? There will be one last minor release for 2.x, that is 2.7. And this will be worked on later this year, but we will be taking a pass at the new features in Vue 3 and see what are backwards compatible. And then we will try to sort of solicit feedback on what we intend to backport. 2.7 will also include deprecation warnings for features removed in 3.0. So just to provide a easier migration path for people who don't immediately want to upgrade. And 2.7 will be additional LTS for 18 months. So that should give most teams enough time to sort of ease it out and plan for future integration. So even after 18 months, it will still receive critical security updates, but will not receive new features after the LTS. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And I think I'll hand over to Thorsten to talk about the teleport in a bit more details. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the introduction. The chat has been quite busy. People got loads of questions, and as I say, we'll leave them for later on at the end of the session. So now it's time to move on to our next part, that is Thorsten on his talk and his presentation. So I'm adding your screen over, and over to you. We cannot hear you, Thorsten.
Yeah, I have a manual mute button on my mic as well. I'm just used to pushing that. Yeah, hi from me. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty happy to be here. Yeah, I will just give you a quick update on the latest RFC that we included, which is the portal RFC, or which you can find here. And as you can see in the URL, it's not really portal, it's teleport. Evan already said it. So the element will be called teleport, the component. It will not be portal because there's this portals element that might find its way, will probably find its way into the browsers and the native web APIs. And so we chose to use a name. And I think it's quite fitting because what does this thing do? Well, it allows you to move elements to a different location in the DOM. The prime use case are modals, drop-downs, notifications, just so you can like break out of the position in the DOM where you're at, and you have complete freedom to put these elements wherever you need them in terms of positioning, styling, Z-index issues, and stuff like that. The goal is to have like an 80-20 situation where we cover the major use cases for such a feature and still get away with adding very little code. So it will not have all the features that Portal Vue has, which is a library of mine, which I will talk about in a second. It will basically do this. So this is what a modal component could look like. You'll have a template in your single file component. You use the teleport with a to property. You tell it the ID of the element that you want to send your content to. And this content could then be moved to a div like this that could be outside of your application container, just so you can break out of the deeply nested DOM where your component is located. I also have a quick example about this here. Okay, I have to restart. I have to refresh the page. Yeah, my MacBook is pretty old. I need a new one. Streaming and Code Sandbox and slides.com is somehow too much work. Yeah, so this is basically what it looks like. So we can show the modal, we can close it, right? We can also disable the modal, the teleport, and show it inline. And we can say, hey, we don't want to show this element inline, we want to actually move it to somewhere else, and then we can enable the portal again, the teleport again, and have the same elements that were nested in the DOM moved to the location that we specified with the to property. This is basically all that's happening here, right? And the good thing about this is that it's not like we're recreating any nested elements or components in our teleport in the new location, which would mean that local state would be lost, or a video element that was playing would be stopped and recreated and restarted. We are really like moving the elements from the position that we are rendering them in to the new location. And when the teleport is disabled again, we're moving them back. And similarly, if the teleport is removed because the parent is destroyed, then it's all cleaned up properly. So yeah, this is the basic demo. And you can just, if we could just look at it in a new window, you would see like, wrong window. Here, if we toggle the modal here, then all of these elements are right here. They're not within our app. But if we were to choose to show it in line, then it would be right here. So yeah, that's basically all there is to it. And yeah, that's basically what it does, right? And the good things compared to what we had with libraries that provided this in Vue 2 is the content stays logical child in the virtual DOM. So $parent works, injections work properly. Everything is properly cleaned up. You can move the same elements without destroying or recreating stuff. Template refs work. There's some timing issues where you have problems with where you have to use next tick 2 times to actually get a ref from the portal element. You can have multiple teleports, so you can have multiple teleport components sending content to the same one target element with a simple append strategy, so they will just be added one below the other, which is usually enough for use cases like modals, but you can probably build on top of this. And they can be disabled to show elements in line, like I just demonstrated. So there's prior art, that's my baby, my Portal Vue library, which does a bit more, but at the cost of having some problems with the parent chain, with injections, with template refs and so forth, things that I just mentioned. And so we're solving all of these issues with the native portal, with the native teleport. I'm still getting used to the name. But I hope that I can just port over all the additional features that are in Portal Vue right now and rebuild them on top of the core teleport that we will have in Vue 3. Yeah, that's basically everything that I have about this. About this single feature, you can read the RFC online. It's merged in our on GitHub in our RFCs repository. There's much more to discover. You can read the comments in the RFC discussion for the pull request, see what the features were that were discussed. Yeah, so that's everything that I got so far.
Thank you so much, Thorsten. As a Vue developer, I've encountered this problem many times where you got a pop-up and you don't know how to really locate it or put it within the DOM, and there's loads of juggling usually going around. So the teleport will probably be really beneficial there. If you're okay, guys, we'll probably get some questions. So we go through the existing questions. So guys,
Yeah,
if you
sure.
have any questions and would like to add any more, please do so. It takes around 10 seconds to probably come and show in our feed. So please add the question as they go. The first question, I'm going up there. Let me see. Let me go through the feed. Yeah. So the first question, it was from Jonathan. So he asked to know if there was will there be a migration guide for library authors for Vue.js 3? Certain library that currently rely on the render function API in Vue 2 will have to make some changes for Vue 3.
That's a good point. We should probably work on something like that. In fact, I think I should work on it next. Yeah, this is something I've been answering a lot of questions internally in the team, because as our team members work on router, work on Vue X, work on these like official libraries. So yeah, I think this is probably a good point. The thing is, yeah, I guess I'll talk to the team members and try to get their biggest, like, what was the thing that you were always wondering about when you were writing the library for Vue 3, and then we can sort of compile the list of things that we think will be helpful to all library authors. I think that's a really good point.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next one was about the size of the library. So you mentioned that it may be 13.5 KB. Is it minified or is before minifigation?
That's minified in gzipped. So obviously Vue 2 minified gzipped is around 23-ish, I think. So it would be magical if Vue 3 unminified is only 13 KB.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's more question. Question about the teleport. This is about accessibility. So do you know, guys, what happened to the focus of the teleport? So if the teleport get moved, does the focus still stays there? And has anyone encountered or have you done any accessibility definition?
That's an interesting question. Honestly, I haven't tested it, because the content is just removed like normal content. So it should behave like any normal removed content.
So something to, these questions sometimes are even more enlightening than they believe.
So the thing is, the content inside the teleport, it isn't moved on mount. So if it's it only gets moved when you have the disable prop that's dynamically changing. Yeah. So I think it will probably lose focus if that happens, but like on the initial mount, it's just mounted directly into the target element. So unless you are sort of dynamically toggling the enable disable state of a teleport, then there should be no issue. But we can definitely look into the focus problem when you are toggling the prop. But if you are controlling the toggle of the enable disable state, then you can probably find a workaround to retain focus after the toggle as well.
Yeah.
But the DOM element themselves are preserved when they're moved. It's not like destroyed and remounted. So at least that's a good part. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there will just be different scenarios concerning accessibility that we didn't bake into the core. If you have a modal, then you probably want to have a tab move into the modal, even though the element is not the next in the tab sequence. But that is something that you would have to build in userland, because if you don't build a modal, but if you build a notification that is just up there in the right corner, you probably don't want to be this as the next element in the tab sequence, right? So it's not something that we can that we chose to bake into this thing. It's something that I think can be solved in userland by providing a wrapper component or something that is handling this.
Fantastic. Then we have a couple of more questions. So there's a question from Jack. you mentioned that ZNCK is working on Typechecking Templates, which is really exciting. Any thought on how that will relate to Vtour templates interpolation?
So so they are going to be working together to get this into Vader. So definitely if this works well enough, we'll get it into Vader. How it's exposed as a command line tool, I honestly don't know. So they'll probably figure it out. But like the least you know is so the thing that Rahul, aka ZNCK, is working on right now is a simple TypeScript plugin. So technically, it can be used by adding it to your TypeScript project, just running TSC, and it should already type check from the command line. So I think that should be fairly straightforward if we want to integrate it into another command line tool. So I don't see any real blocker from happening. So the biggest part is getting it properly working inside Vader. So
yeah. Also, just something meta. The handle for Rahul is ZNCK0
on Twitter.
He's, this handle belongs to someone else, just so there's no confusion.
Yeah.
Let me see. I'm just finding.
Yeah, but he is indeed ZNCK on GitHub, though. So.
Oh, so there's a clash of names there.
Yeah.
So, okay, another question. So what would be the benefit of updating the API for Vue X if the majority of the functionality can be replicated with the composition API?
Well, yeah, so the primary benefit is first, there will be a consistent pattern for injecting your store instances into your component tree. The second is, so Vue X with the composition API flavor will be reduced to focus more on orchestration of multiple stores, aka like how these stores are sort of managed together and how they communicate with the dev tool. And also it provides sort of a structure for you to write your state management code in a consistent fashion. So because composition API is still relatively low level, it has so much flexibility. So every developer will probably write somewhat different code if you just let them use it raw. So Vue X sort of is a more opinionated layer on top of it, together with some convention for managing multi-stores and working with the dev, like logging the stuff to the dev tools. Because of this more, you can say it's a bit more restrictive than plain composition API, but that restrictiveness is what enables the dev tools to better understand the intentions of your code so that it can provide more valuable debugging information to you.
That's good. Thank you. A couple more questions. Next question, I know the answer, but I'll say that. How is it going to be with the IE bundle? So Vue 3 uses proxies now. So what is going to happen with the IE?
Yeah, so here's the thing. So the IE compatibility build will have a fallback strategy, which uses the plain or getter setters based implementation for reactivity. So yes, if it's running in, if you intend to support IE 11, then you can't benefit from the proxy-only features like property addition and observation of like map set, weak set, which isn't available in IE anyway. So your bundle will also be slightly larger because it have to ship both the proxy version and the old version. So in modern browser, it will use the proxy version because it's more performant. But then if you say you are using the IE compatible build, but you are writing code that kind of relies on property addition, the proxy-based version will detect that and tell you, hey, you are writing code that won't work in IE, so you should stay away from that.
By the way, this is the last point is one of the big points probably for the plugin migration guide, for the library author migration guide. So because library authors also have to like watch out for this.
Yep, that's true.
Did I miss any questions, guys? There were quite a few comments, so it was quite complicated for me. There was just a question about if you could explain more about TSX support, TypeScript support. I think it was kind of explained about.
I don't know what specifically you want to know about, but it's like if you define a component and then use it as a TSX tag, it'll have auto completion for the props. That's pretty much it.
Fantastic.
And type checking for the props as well.
That's good. I have a question myself from the teleport. So if you use, say, for example, I want to use the teleport as a model, and I add it on different parts of the screen. So I wanted to, I'm kind of teleporting to multiple parts of the screen with a different content, for example. Would actually the state of the teleport be, so would it mount every time, or would it actually be just one component be rendered multiple times?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Is a different component be rendered all the time, or is it actually going to be always the same component? Would the mounted be triggered every time, or is it actually being already mounted will be mounted just once?
You mean the teleport?
Yeah, the teleport.
I don't really understand. Are you saying like when it's being disabled and enabled?
Yes, but this, for example, I enable and disable somewhere, enable and disable somewhere. So when it's disabled,
right. It's the same component instance. It's just being physically moved inside the DOM. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. I saw a question early on, just now, from Tyzoid. How do I ping this comment? Can I do that?
Press on it as you show. This one?
Yeah. So yeah, to answer that, there is still going to be a full compiler included build, just like Vue 2, right? So usage doesn't change. You can still do that. Obviously, it's going to include the compiler. The new compiler is slightly heavier than Vue 2, so I think the full build is now 35 KB, around 35 KB gzipped. That's like including both the runtime and the compiler, everything together. I think Vue 2 is currently like 33. So that's like just a little bit heavier, but like it has this exact same way of working. You can still write your templates directly in the DOM. You can still just mount it directly. So this is not going to change. Yeah.
That's fantastic. It's good. So I hope I haven't missed any other question, Guy. I am extremely thrilled and happy that the beta is coming. I will probably start and use it myself, and come up with feedback. And I hope everyone around in the audience will probably do the same. There's one more question. I don't think Milan. I don't think this is probably the right forum for that. I will probably give you some comment later on comments how to build up a Next application. There's plenty of documentation. Is very great documentation on that. But for that, I wanted to say, it's been a great pleasure, guys, to have you around. So if there's anything else that you would like to share with everyone else around, I'll thank you myself, and I'll thank you for the audience for sharing everything and for all the great work that you've done so far on Vue 3.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.